Welcome, seekers of truth and power. You have entered the hidden realm where codes of divinity shape destiny itself. This is Anime What If Saga, where every secret behind strength and sacrifice is unveiled. Tonight, the veil between legend and legacy lifts once more, revealing the rebirth of an ancient will. This is the System, Code of Ascension, Part 5, Legacy of the Shadow Lineage. When the war between light and shadow faded into silence, the world entered an era that historians would later call the Age of Restoration. Cities once torn by mana storms began to rise again, and for the first time in centuries, humanity believed the worst was behind them. But the truth was far quieter and far more dangerous. The storm had not ended. It had only changed its form. The rulers retreated beyond the veil, their oaths fulfilled but their purpose unfinished. The monarchs, shattered and scattered, had either been sealed or annihilated by the hand of the shadow monarch, Sung Jin-woo, whose power transcended both divine light and abyssal dark. Yet even Jin-woo, who had rewritten the laws of existence, could not erase one thing: legacy. Shadows leave imprints, and his were deeper than he ever realized. The system that had once governed humanity's ascension remained, though altered, quieter, subtler, almost dormant. Where once it roared in blue light and divine code, it now murmured through instinct and intuition. Hunters were still born, gates still appeared, but their purpose was different. They no longer faced extinction, but evolution. Yet evolution never stops, and neither does the will of power. Generations passed. The name Sung Jin-woo became legend, the man who walked between death and life, who stood against gods and demons, and who vanished without a trace. The world remembered him as myth, a savior, a ghost. Children grew up hearing tales of his shadow army rising beneath eclipsed skies, of his eyes glowing like obsidian stars. But myths, as always, hold truths, and truth has a way of waking when least expected. In the city of Seoul, rebuilt into a sprawling metropolis of mana-infused architecture and radiant energy towers, the descendants of the first hunters lived among ordinary citizens. The Hunter Association had evolved into the Global Mana Authority, a council that monitored rifts and the delicate equilibrium of energy flow across the planet. They had long abandoned the term hunters for something more modern, more diplomatic. But deep within the underground networks, in hidden forums, private guilds, and forbidden libraries, whispers persisted. The system still speaks. One of those whispers belonged to a young man named Rael. He wasn't a hunter, at least, not by title. His mana output was negligible, his physical stats ordinary, his potential rating unremarkable. But what he lacked in measurable power, he made up for with something else, a strange affinity for shadow. Not darkness, not the absence of light, but true shadow, the living essence that moved when he did, lingered when he slept, and sometimes, whispered when he dreamed. He never told anyone about the voice. Not his instructors at the academy, not the evaluators who dismissed him as a failed recruit, and certainly not his peers. Because the voice was too real. It spoke not in words, but in sensations, memories that weren't his, images of wars fought in black skies, of a man with dark armor and silver eyes standing before a god of light. Every time Rael closed his eyes, he saw that figure, calm, unshakable, solitary. Then came the night everything changed. It was during a small rift cleanup mission, routine work assigned to low-grade trainees. The gate was ranked C-class, stable, predictable. But when the team entered, the world warped. The mana density inside was unlike anything recorded. Time slowed, and every sound became distant. His teammates screamed, but their voices echoed as if trapped underwater. And then, the light went out. In the darkness, Rael felt warmth, not from fire, but from within himself. The ground beneath him cracked, shadows bleeding out like liquid. He tried to move, but the air itself resisted him. Then came a voice, distant yet familiar, speaking in the forgotten tone of divine code. Initializing, user detected. Verifying bloodline. Shadow Monarch, confirmed. System rebooting. Welcome, successor. The world around him exploded into motion. The shadows beneath his feet surged upward like a wave, swallowing the monsters that had been waiting to strike. His eyes widened as figures began to form within the darkness, silhouettes of soldiers kneeling before him. Their voices echoed in unison, "My liege." Rail collapsed. When he woke, he was back outside the gate. The rift had closed, his teammates were unconscious but alive, and the cleanup unit found no trace of monsters. The report labeled it a mana fluctuation anomaly. But Rail knew better. The system had returned, through him. At first, he tried to deny it. The power frightened him. Every time he closed his eyes, he could feel it waiting, patient, bound, ancient. The shadow soldiers whispered in the edge of his perception, calling him young monarch. But the more he resisted, the more it grew. Objects would vanish in darkness when he touched them, reappearing moments later at his will. His reflection sometimes blinked a heartbeat later than he did. And sometimes, when he was alone, he could feel another presence watching him, proud, yet sorrowful. Rail sought answers, and his search led him into the underworld of forbidden knowledge, where relics of Jin Wu's age were preserved in secret. He found fragments of the old system data, still encrypted in mana circuits buried beneath the old Hunter Association's archives. He decoded them slowly, obsessively, until one phrase repeated across every record: "The successor protocol remains active." That night, he heard the voice again, clearer this time. "You were never chosen by chance. You are the echo of my will." Rail froze. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I am what remains of him, the one who bore the shadows before you. The one who walked both paths and sealed the war that none could win." "Jin Wu," Rail breathed. "Names are for mortals," the voice replied. "I am his memory. His purpose. And now, you are mine." From that moment, Rail's destiny became irreversible. The system awakened within him, not as a tool, but as an inheritance. The interface appeared, archaic, faintly glowing, embedded within his vision. But unlike the original hunters, his version bore a sigil unknown to history, a crown of half-light, half-dark, encircled by code that read: System versus Point 2, Monarch Protocol enabled. Through it, Rail began to understand the truth that even Jin Wu had not foreseen. The system had not only evolved, it had adapted. Where once it sought to balance light and shadow through one vessel, now it sought to transcend them entirely. Rail was not meant to restore balance. He was meant to rewrite it. But the world outside was changing again. The rulers' retreat had not been eternal. Sensing the reactivation of the system, fragments of their essence began to return, celestial emissaries disguised as humans, guiding nations, building influence. They saw Rail's awakening as an anomaly, a threat to the order they had fought to establish. And where light fears shadow, conflict follows. Meanwhile, remnants of the monarchs, the scattered consciousness of beings once sealed, began to stir. Drawn to the resurgence of shadow energy, they sought new hosts, corrupting those who craved power. A silent war began beneath the surface of peace, assassinations, vanishing guild leaders, unexplained rift anomalies. The Global Mana Authority tried to contain it, but their instruments couldn't detect what was truly happening. The battle had returned, not in armies and gates, but within souls. Rail, still struggling to master his awakening, was thrust into the center of this new chaos. Every power he used drew attention, every shadow he summoned left traces in the mana network. Soon, hunters began whispering his name. Some called him cursed. Others, chosen. And in the unseen realm, the rulers began to debate whether to destroy him or guide him. But Rail's path was already written. The shadow within him was more than power, it was memory. Each time he summoned a soldier, he could feel their stories, warriors from centuries past, fragments of Jin Wu's own army. Through them, he relived battles he'd never fought, sacrifices he'd never made. He saw Jin Woo's eyes, calm even as the world burned, and he began to understand. Power was not the inheritance. Will was. The final proof came one night when he stood before his reflection and saw not his own face, but Jin Woo's shadow overlaying his. You were never meant to follow me, the voice said. You were meant to surpass me. Rail clenched his fists. And if surpassing you means repeating your pain, then you are ready. With that, the darkness around him solidified, forming the armor of the Shadow Monarch once more, not as an echo, but as evolution. The system interface glowed brighter than ever before. New directive unlocked. Reconstruction protocol. Merge humanity and divinity. Objective. Rewrite the cycle. And thus began a new era. The shadows no longer obeyed one man, they obeyed purpose. Rail became the living bridge between mortal and divine, the first being to wield the system as creator, not follower. Yet his awakening also reawakened the ancient opposition. The rulers, envoys descended once more, seeking to reclaim dominion, to enforce balance by erasing the variable that Jin Woo had left behind. And in that silent conflict, the world would once again learn that peace is not the absence of war, it is the interval before the next evolution. The legacy of the Shadow Monarch lived on, not as a memory, but as a heartbeat pulsing within every shadow cast by the light of the new age. And in the quiet corners of Seoul, when night fell and the air shimmered with mana, one could sometimes hear a whisper, not of fear, but of reverence. The shadow has returned. And though Rail would never call himself a hero, nor a god, nor even a monarch, he carried within him the truth that Sung Jin Woo had once discovered, that power means nothing without purpose, and that every shadow is born from the courage to stand against the light. And thus, the legend continues, the code rewritten, the shadows reborn, and a new monarch awakening in a world that has forgotten the price of power. If this tale stirred your curiosity, remember to like, comment, and share it. Subscribe to Anime What If Saga for the next chapter of the system, Code of Ascension, where destiny is no longer inherited, it is rewritten.